This is my 1988 Toyota pickup. It's got a turbo engine swap, and we're back working on it today because I put this on the dyno where it made nearly triple the factory horsepower. You got the trans? And that was too much for the 300,000-mile automatic transmission that came stock in the 1999 Toyota Tacoma that I used as a donor truck. So let's get into fixing this thing, what this thing is, and how I'm going to get it back on the road. If you haven't been following along with the project, this is my 1988 Toyota pickup. It came with a 22R carbureted engine, putting about 95 horsepower down, and I was not going to have that, so I went ahead and I bought a 1999 Toyota Tacoma that was wrecked. I took the entire drivetrain, wiring harness, and interior out of it, seats, dash, steering wheel, wiring from headlights to taillights, 2RZ engine and automatic transmission from that Tacoma into this. After I got the swap done, I went ahead, I put an eBay turbo onto the side of it, we turned the boost up, I strapped it to the dyno, and this thing made 250 wheel horsepower and 300 wheel torque. That is really good numbers coming from a stock computer 2.4 liter Toyota truck engine from the 90s. I was really stoked with that, but unfortunately on the last dyno pull, the transmission slipped pretty bad. I was not even able to make it home before this transmission completely and totally gave out, and there is no more forward or reverse. There's an insanely loud pump whine from the transmission. So that leaves us where we are today. The transmission in this thing is completely and totally toast. We're gonna have to get to replacing it. So I'm gonna be throwing a used transmission in this thing that he had laying around, and we're gonna be getting this thing back on the road. Hopefully it lasts a lot longer than the one that's in it, that only lasts about 2,000 miles. But I'm also not going to be pushing it quite as hard, and I do have future plans for other transmission ideas. A lot of you guys have said I should manual transmission swap this thing, and I think I might, but this is the quickest, easiest, and cheapest way for me to get this thing back on the road as soon as possible so I can get back to enjoying it. Here is the transmission I got for this thing. Obviously, not quite the ideal situation with the torque converter being off, and it's pretty nasty. It's been sitting for a while. There's literally cobwebs off of the shaft, but I'm gonna get this thing cleaned up to the best of my ability. I'm gonna get as much of it pulled apart as I can. I'm gonna get this torque converter cleaned up as best I can. I'm gonna drain the fluid from both of them. I'm gonna see if I can get a filter replaced. I'm gonna check out the inside of this thing. We got the turbo truck up in the air so we can jump underneath. We got most everything we could from up top disconnected, most of the bell housing bolts, the starter, a few other things. Underneath, we got to take the shifter off, the drive shaft, drain the fluids, and get the torque converter bolts out. There's 6 torque converter bolts that need to come out. It's a little bit of a pain with my custom oil pan because it's a little bit close to the transmission, but it's not too bad. I'm going to jump under there. I'm going to get the torque converter bolts pulled out. I'm going to get the fluid drained, shifter disconnected, drive shaft disconnected, and that old transmission should plop right on out, and we'll be ready to throw the new one in. All right, we got everything disconnected. We got all the bell housing bolts. We got all of the torque converter bolts. We have all of the electric, the drive shaft. Let's see what this oil looks like. Let's see what this transmission fluid looks like. Oh, that's some brown fluid. Whew, smells bad. We got everything disconnected from this transmission. We've got the kickdown cable, all the bell housing bolts, all the torque converter bolts. Down below, we got all the wiring, the rear drive shaft. We got a jack under it ready to go. Trans lines are disconnected. It is just ready to drop. So we got the old transmission out of the truck. Over here you can see it is grimy, gross, but we got everything made sure that it was the exact same as the transmission that's going into it. And we got a torque converter on the transmission that's going in. I put about 1.5 quarts of ATF into the torque converter itself, trying to get it as full as I possibly could before putting it into the truck. And the only thing left before we actually put it in the truck is pulling this dipstick tube off so we can get clearance to throw it up into the frame rails. hopefully we can have a running turbo truck by the end of the day. I've been trying to stab this transmission for 5 hours now. For some reason, things don't want to line up, and I think the reason might be the spacer that holds the flex plate out from the crankshaft. So I'm going to go ahead, use my nifty difty right angle impact and a shallow socket and see if I can't go up in there and pull the spacer that's behind the flex plate and put it in front of the flex plate. I think that'll work, but I have no idea. So, big jump. We got the transmission in and wrapped up last night. I spent the better portion of 12 hours trying to get that done, and that was after the old transmission was already out of the truck. What had happened was the torque converter I got with the transmission I put in the truck, that torque converter, had the wrong spline count for the input shaft on the transmissions. These are 26 spline input shafts, and that has a 20 spline input shaft spline on the inside, down in there. It's full of fluid now. So, in essence, I cleaned that torque converter, got it good, and tried to install it. I thought I had it all the way installed on the transmission. Unfortunately, it wasn't. I couldn't get the transmission and the transfer case mated together. There was just no way it was going to happen. I tried and I tried and I tried. I then went and flushed the old torque converter that came from the transmission that was in this thing. Hopefully, it's not too bad. I went ahead, I flushed it a couple times, tried to get it as clean as I could, put some new fluid in it, stabbed that on, and the engine and transmission are mated. Everything's back together. I wrapped up the drive shafts and all the wiring and everything. I got so frustrated that after 6 hours of fighting the torque converter and the transmission and the engine and trying to get it in, and I don't have a lift, so I was laying on my back, rolling around in transmission fluid. I felt gross. I was really frustrated. I didn't want to film. Last night, I went ahead and wrapped everything up. I got the truck ready to start, but I didn't have transmission fluid. So this morning, I've got some transmission fluid over there. I've got a gallon that I'm going to use to flush the system because this is only about a 4-quart system. I'm going to put a gallon in there, go through all the gears, get the fluid moving, try and get it all back into the pan, and then I'm going to drain it. Then I'm going to fill it up with the fluid that I plan on running, and I'm probably actually going to change this fluid again here in like 100 to 200 miles just to try and give this transmission the best possible life of not exploding. We went ahead, we got the transmission filled up, we got the engine running, we got it warmed up, and we're about ready to back this thing out of the garage and take it for its inaugural test drive with the new transmission. Oh boy, it feels good to be back in this seat. Whew. She definitely goes. She definitely goes. Definitely better than the last transmission. Woo! I miss those noises. Well, it does burnouts on dirt again. That's more than it did. Oh, I love this truck. I definitely missed this. Oh. Yeah, buddy! The roads are a little wet, but like that spun all the way carrying into second. So far, it's been a pretty successful test drive. There's a little bit of a runnability issue, but it's not transmission related. It's like idling high and then not liking the idle. So I'm not sure exactly what's going on there, but I reset everything. Hopefully the computer's just being wonky from sitting for so long. But what better way to break in my transmission than haul 1,200 pounds of wood pellets to heat my house. So far it's done real good. Have had no issues. It's not slipping even with 1,200 pounds in the bed. So far so good. 10 out of 10. Super pumped to have this thing back on the road.